Coming up on River City Presents, a college professor, a karate studio business owner, and a state representative and a city commissioner. My first guest is Gerald Watkins. Welcome to River City Presents. My name's Daniel Hurt. This is a show that's going to talk to leaders in the community who make it work, whether it's from politics, business, labor, arts and culture. We want to hear their stories and hear what they're about. Now, my first guest was a WKCTC professor right here for over 20 years, 28 years. He owned a karate studio, which you may or may not have known, and at one time had the largest karate school in all of Kentucky. He was also a Paducah City Commissioner from 2006 to 2012 and he was a former state representative representing District 3, Paducah, and the Reedland area. Full disclosure, I worked for this man for 6 years, and I will try to be as fair as possible, but that is always difficult with someone like Gerald Watkins, who I admire so much. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
Well, thank you, Daniel Hurt. It's great to be with you, and I'm honored to be the first guest on the #1 rated show by Nielsen right out of the gate. And so, you know, I look forward to, you know, the great things that you're going to do in TV and politics and business yourself. And I'm honored to be with you.
Well, I'm glad to have you. You were the first person I thought of whenever it came to coming up with my first guest. I couldn't think of anybody else. You've been on Gerald Watkins, or on Barry Craig's show for so long. You know, you said it was like Gunsmoke. I don't know who it is, but I'm not Marshall Dillon. So, but I wanted
we had fun.
But I wanted to talk to you about some of your background that people may not know. And you know, you've got this long career of public service, and you were a business owner. And you know, before your career, your family originated originally in between the rivers, right? That's
correct, Daniel. And I've got a long resume because I've been around for a long time, but. Yes, my dad was born in the land between the lakes, and his family, they had 74 acres up there, and they were all raised in the LBL. So our family history in Western Kentucky and the land between the lakes goes back for many generations.
Yeah, your father was a pastor, correct?
He was a Pentecostal preacher at Starline Works in the land between the lakes. He built the church himself, and he was a pastor, and until they had to get out when TVA came through, and so yeah.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. How did you end up in Paducah? How did you?
Well, when my dad lived up there, and he had a wife and 3 children, and he was working on. He used to be an operating engineer, and he went to work one morning, and the house caught on fire, and he lost his wife and 18-month-old daughter, and the 5-, 7-, and 9-year-old 2 girls and a boy were able to escape. And so after the fire, they moved to Paducah, and then he met my mom at church and married her and had 6 more. So there were 9
big family.
9 of us, actually 11 originally. 2 died at a very young age, my dad's first marriage, and so my mom and dad raised 9 children in Paducah. So I went through the Paducah public schools, and all of us did. Where did you
live in Paducah? You went to Walter Jeton, right?
I went to Jeton and went to Paducah Tillman High School. I grew up principally at 1210 Tennessee Street on the south side of Paducah.
Yeah, I knew you'd gone through Paducah Tillman, and you graduated from there, and then you ended up going on to here, right? Paducah Community College eventually, right?
That's right. I didn't go to college right after high school. I didn't have any money and didn't know if I could even pass the first class, to be perfectly honest. And I had an older brother that moved to Fort Lauderdale, so he invited me. I went down there and did construction work for a year and came back here. And
what was that like?
I loved it down there. You know, there were so many things to do. It was daylight so many hours of the day. The weather was beautiful, and I absolutely loved Fort Lauderdale. And I grew up down there, and I would have stayed, but the economy went south at the time, and so my employer, a plastering contractor, we built houses, and he was going bankrupt, so I just took what I had and came on back to Paducah.
Like Happy Chandler, everybody's going home.
Yeah, it worked out fine. That's what God had in store for my life. But it was a good time in my life. I enjoyed that year in Fort Lauderdale, and I learned a lot. And like I said, I grew up, I think, and wound up back in Paducah and worked for the city of Paducah in construction. I was a truck driver and then a concrete finisher, and I quit to go to college and came out here for a couple of years, then transferred to Murray State, and I went on and I got my AA, BS, and MBA degrees in 24 hours above my MBA, so I was able to pass at least the first class. And I wound up teaching out here, economics and business first, and then moved over to political science when Dr. Chun Rowe, my mentor, retired. And so I stayed here 28.5 years and retired a couple of years ago, nearly a year and a half.
So what was it like ending up as a professor at a place that you went to school here? I mean, I'm sure you got to work with some of your mentors like Chung Rowe or Professor Robertson, and I'm sure that was quite an experience to come back all those years later.
A big surprise for me. I just tell people it proves there's a God, because certainly that's was a miracle in my life to think of someone who grew up, dirt poor, and my father had a 6th grade education, my mother had an 8th grade education, and so to be able to obtain that high level of education and then come out here as a professor was a great honor. And I've had probably over 70 professors in my life, and Dr. Chun Rowe and John Robertson, although I loved most all of them, those two were and still are to this day my all-time favorites, and to be able to work with them, to teach with them, was always a great honor, I felt like.
Yeah, and I was privileged to have you as a professor too, and that was fun. It was my first semester at WKCT, actually.
Well, that's how we met and became fast friends, because we had a mutual interest in politics.
Exactly. But before politics, something that a lot of people may not know is that you were in the karate business. You had your own studio for nearly 20 years, or maybe it was even longer than that. I know you went part-time there for a while. And so tell me, how did you get into karate?
Well, like I say, I grew up on the south side, and it was kind of a rough neighborhood. My former next-door neighbor is still in prison for murdering 5 of our neighbors. But me and my younger brother were in a fast food restaurant eating, and we got jumped by a couple of guys that already had a jail record about a page long each. Wow. and had a big fight. And thank goodness we come out okay. And karate school opened up not too much longer after that, and I told my brother, I said, come on, brother, this is for me and you. So I trained and just fell in love with it, and it was the first thing I really did athletically, and kind of excelled at it, I guess, and loved it, and I was there all the time. And so the instructor, when he would have new students come in and he didn't have time, he would ask me to teach them to get them started. And so I realized that, I kind of like that too. And so eventually, some people wanted me to start teaching, and I refused at first, thinking no one would be interested, but they were, and God blessed. And at one time I had 318 students, and it was the largest karate school in Kentucky at the time.
It's amazing.
So I did it 5 years full-time, and then 14 years part-time, so a total of 19 years.
See, that's interesting. People always talk about how Paducah doesn't have anything going for it sometimes. There's so much, it seems like these days there's so much, vitriol and disappointment, or, they don't always see the brighter spots. And, I think that the fact that you did that is significant. And, my uncle, Paul Kriel-Kavilsky, who you may know, was also part of the karate field at one time. And so you probably met him over time through there.
I have. Great guy.
But you did that for quite some time, and then you became a professor. So when you became a professor, did you leave the karate business? Did you quit doing that?
Well, I quit doing it full-time, and that's when I shifted to a part-time status, and continued to teach part-time for 14 more years. And then I eventually, I eventually quit doing that and started selling real estate part-time.
Which you're back in now.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I sold real estate for 8 years part-time and did pretty well at it. and then I put my license in escrow, and then after I retired from the college, I began to realize I needed to make some money. And so I didn't want to try to teach karate again, not at my age, and so I started selling real estate, so doing pretty well with it.
I will say, when I was out on the campaign trail knocking doors for you, when you were running for state representative, a lot of people remember the karate days. I talked to somebody who said that they absolutely did remember that you did do that you had that open. They were former students or something. But the real calling that you had for your life was public service, and I think there's no question of that. What is the earliest memory you have of wanting to be in public service?
When I was age 21, when I was younger, I had really no interest. I mean, I did keep up, my job, at age 8, I had to work to pay for my lunch, lunches and clothes and toys and everything else. So I sold newspapers, and starting at age 8. And so I began to read the newspapers daily at age 8. To keep up with what was going on, and just always enjoyed current events, and but I really didn't take a real interest in politics till I guess I was about 20. But at age 21, that's when I decided that I would like to try to pursue running for public office and public service at some point in my life. And so that was before I even went to college. I was 23 when I quit the city and enrolled out here to take courses. But I began to realize at age 21 that that's what I wanted to do.
Did you have mentors or people that sort of inspired you to want to run for office? Was there somebody that was out there that was like, man, I want to emulate that?
Well, I didn't really know anyone or the neighborhood I grew up, although the neighbor right across the street had been a former city commissioner. And I liked him. He was an electrician. I used to go over there and hang out.
Who was that?
Troy Clark. He used so I hung out with him, and he had been a professional wrestler, so he was pretty interesting man. But so I didn't really know anyone at a younger age, but at the national level, there were some leaders that I admired and respected, and my real interest, I guess, was local and state's interesting, but I was always interested in national politics, and so there were some candidates and public servants at the national level that I greatly admired, and some past presidents that I thought were great role models and great public servants and did a lot for the country. And so those type people inspired me to want to try to get an education and try to enter public service at some point.
Well, then 2006 rolled around and you announced for city commission. What made you decide to throw your hat in that ring?
Well, actually, Barry Craig, who used to host this show, was the reason I got in that race, because the race was coming up and I really hadn't thought a whole lot about it, but every time he had introduced me to someone, he would say he's running for the city commission. And I hadn't even
sounds like something you do, yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even decided. We hadn't really talked about it that much. And so finally I laughed after he had said that to someone else, and I said, well, I guess I'm running for the city commission, huh? So I did, and we won.
Yeah, that was, and you served between 2006 and 2012, and Mayor Paxton was the mayor. And what was it like serving on the city commission at that time? What issues did you want to get done, and what would you say were some of the more proud moments you had in that session?
That was a fun 6 years, 3 terms. Mayor Paxton was a great mayor, and we got a lot done. One, in the area of job creation, we had a great economic development president in Chad Chancellor, who worked extremely hard and brought in a lot of jobs. And it was our job to create a climate. We supported these businesses that wanted to open up here with tax incentives, and we had to be supportive or they wouldn't come. Right. And so we, with Chad Chancellor leading and the commission supporting in the fiscal court, we created over 1,100 jobs with over $90 million in private investment during those 6 years I was on the city commission the first time. We also, it was my vote, I mean, a lot of people worked a lot harder than I did, but it was my vote that give us a compromise, or it was my compromise that allowed it to move forward, and the City Commission and the Fiscal Court supported, and Murray State University and the Greater Paducah Economic Development Council, and we landed Murray State University's 2+2. So now we have, along with the UK engineering degree program, we have a true 4-year university presence in Paducah, McCracken County, Kentucky now, and that, I think, is probably the best thing to happen to Paducah in the last 50 years.
Explain kind of what the 2+2 does.
Well, you can, I mean, we got one of the top 10 2-year community colleges in the country out of about 1,200 schools, as you know, and finished second place 1 year. So we have a wonderful school here, and I was always honored to be just a small part of it. But it allows someone who lives in Paducah, McCracken County, or the surrounding area to get your first 2 years here at WKCTC, and then you can transfer to Murray State University and never leave Paducah. Their campus is right across the street, and they have the majority of their degree programs that they offer on campus, they offer in Paducah also. So it's a wonderful development for people in Paducah, McCracken County, and the surrounding area of Western Kentucky and Southern Illinois to have an opportunity to get a 4-year degree and stay local.
It's wonderful. In fact, I have utilized that structure over there across the street. It's a wonderful building.
Yeah.
And I understand, you know, there was a lot of bipartisan work that got done on that city commission too. I mean, you were able to work with people on both sides of the aisle. I think too often, you know, we see this partisan gridlock, but you were able to really get a lot of good work done with both sides of the aisle, right?
We absolutely did, Daniel, and I'm real proud of that. I'm not partisan, really, and I just want to do what's right for the community, the state, the country, and for the people, to provide greater opportunities for education, jobs, a better quality of life. And so I have a great relationship with my Republican friends. I did at the local level, I did at the state level. And if you take that attitude, then you can get a lot done. And instead of taking the bickering, fighting, partisan stance and where the other side's the enemy, you'll never get anything accomplished if that's the way your outlook is on life or politics or public service. You've got to work together, and the public expects you. They don't want to go too far to the right, too far to the left. They're kind of in the middle, and they want you to work together to try to improve their lives, and that's what we try to do. Another great thing that I was really proud of was the community scholarship, where now anyone who graduates from any school, public or private or homeschool in Paducah and McCracken County, with minimal requirements, can get your first 2 years of college here at WKCTC free of charge. And so it gives you a student an opportunity, if you were poor like me, a leg up on trying to get an education without acquiring so much debt when you finish and graduate.
And it's a real problem, of course. In 2000, but then, you know, you took that from the local level to the state level, because in 2012, Brent Hausman, who was the state representative, retired, and then you sought that seat for the state legislature. What went into making you make the leap from the city to the state?
Well, I've always been interested in education and crime and punishment in particular. I guess probably goes back to the neighborhood I grew up in, but criminal justice has always been my #1 passion, and education right there with it, and of course economic development and job creation. And you can do more in those areas at the state level, and so it was kind of a natural progression for me, and to want to move up. And we were successful and got to serve 3 terms, and worked well with my Republican colleagues, and particularly Senator Danny Carroll of Paducah, and I got 7 bills passed into law as a result, and I feel like we did some good things. One bill I was particularly proud of is from a local case here. The judge and the sheriff called me to let me know the details, and if a person attempted to murder a law enforcement official and didn't do physical harm, then it was a nonviolent offense, which means they only had to serve 20% of their time, and then they were generally released. And so a gentleman, not a gentleman, a man, it was an ambush, called in a 911 domestic violence, or his wife did, and deputy sheriff showed up, and then the guy was hiding in a tree line with a high-powered deer rifle and tried to kill him.
Oh, wow.
And because he didn't hit him, he didn't actually hit him, it wasn't a violent offense. He got 10 years, but the judge said he'll serve about 22 months and he'll go home. So my bill that I got passed into law, attempted murder of a law enforcement officer of any kind, is a violent offense, and they have to serve 85% of their time now.
It seems like I remember that story, but yeah, I mean, something certainly needed to be done, and you took the effort to address that. I was also on that campaign trail, you know, the fall of 2012, you met this long-haired kid who wanted to, you know, help with your campaign, and it ended up being me, of course, and I was very happy to have done that. Like I said, it's hard for me to be unbiased when working for you. But
well, I will tell you, Daniel, your friendship is one of the reasons that it made teaching out here so enjoyable. The relationships, the friendships that you make that become lifelong friendships, and you're one of those, certainly a prime example of a young man who smart, worked hard, good values, and was interested in public service, who helped me, because if you hadn't have been there for me, I'm not so sure that I would have won.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I've always bragged on you as a rising star, and you still are a young man who's got it together, and your help in my campaigns was invaluable, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your friendship.
Well, absolutely, anytime. I know, of course, in 2016, you know, all the Democrats got defeated except for two, you and Will Coursey, were the only Democrats representing Kentucky west of Bowling Green. What do you think led to such a drubbing for the Democratic Party?
Well, I think it started in the 60s, actually, but the problem for moderate to conservative Democrats, which used to dominate the South and the Midwest, and the state general assemblies, state and local politics in the South and the Midwest particularly, and at the national level, as the people who began to win the nomination at the national level were more liberal on the social issues than the people who lived in this area of the country and of Kentucky. And so that really hurt Democrats in the South and the Midwest as far as getting reelected. And so over time, those social issues changed the majorities in all these southern states. And that was the reason why, and in my district, when, as you know, me and you running, and you run in my campaigns, all the Republicans top to bottom around here, including the Republican candidates for president, the U.S. Senate, Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, James Comer, Ed Whitfield, Matt Bevin, all the Republican candidates would win my district between 60 and 70% of the vote. But we won it anywhere from 53 to 60% of the vote in all three of my elections. I think it was about 52 to 60%. And but the reason is people around here know me, and I'm conservative on social issues. I'm a Christian, and I try to be nonpartisan. I try to do the right thing, and far from perfect, but I try to work hard for the district and the community that I serve. And I think enough people around here know me and know my character and my values that they had confidence in me. So I always appreciated that, and always felt like it was a great honor. And
absolutely. And yeah, you were able to win in Paducah when most Democrats were not able to, and I think that's a testament to your nature of being bipartisan. And I think people who are bipartisan, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, that's extremely important, because people want results and not just partisanship. But after 2018, you know, in 2018 you decided not to seek a term in the General Assembly again, and then you wanted to run for a city commission here in town. What led to that decision?
Well, I loved those 6 years in Frankfort, and again, you can get a lot done that's very consequential, not just locally, but statewide. But really, to be perfectly honest, the reason I didn't seek re-election is because of the drive. I hated that drive. It's a 4-hour drive from my home in Paducah and out of 138 lawmakers in the House and the Senate. I was the third from the furthest one to have a drive. Only 2 other lawmakers had a further drive to Frankfort than me. And it's tiring. And then you have to stay in a hotel, or in my last term, I rented a house, but I'd stayed in a hotel for 5 years. And, you know, it just gets old staying in a hotel room. It gets old driving 4 hours each way. And I wanted to come home and do something local.
Well, and now, of course, you've served your term on the city commission, and you're retiring from that. So is Gerald Watkins done with politics, or is there anything down the road?
Well, we'll have to see what God has in mind, what doors open, and how things shape up in the future. But you know, I'm young enough and I'm perfect health that I exercise daily, and feel like I have the energy and the ambition and the drive to still serve. And so if an opportunity presents itself, maybe something local in 2022, we'll have to see what happens and who doesn't run for re-election, and see what options there are, and make a decision at that point. But there's a real possibility that I would seek election in 2022 to some office. By then, things will, you know, have smoothed over around Paducah and my family. There was some things going on in my family that needed my attention, and as the main reason I didn't seek re-election to the city commission. And so things are getting better in that area as far as a family member. And so, you know, hopefully in a couple of years, things will be right, and time will be right.
Well, we're about out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on our first show, and it means a lot to me that you're willing to be here. And I think we went over a lot of things that'll be of interest to people, and I hope to see what you got to do next. I mean, you're still on city commission, so we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you, Daniel. You'll be the first one I'll tell, and it's an honor to be your first guest on your inaugural television program. Good luck with it.
Well, that's our show. My first guest, Gerald Watkins, and we'll hope to see you next time.